Hello, everyone. Can you guys hear me? Hi, Bumblebee. Hi, Fox. JL, Foxy Lady, Kellyanne, Vincina. Did I say Vincina? If I didn't, sorry. Um, so there's another big live going on right now, but this is the only time I have to do it, so I'm gonna have to go ahead and do it right now. Um, you guys can hear me, right? I don't know why the chat's so behind on StreamYard. Yes, you can hear me. Okay, good. Okay, so I'm gonna just go ahead and get started right away. Um, for the people that aren't here, you snooze, you lose. That's what I say. So that way there's not so much silence and stuff before we start, because I know some people complain about that. So what I want to do is I'm going to play my last video that I did for those of you who have not seen it already. If I can find it here. Okay, so let's see here. Sorry, it takes me a second to multitask here. So yeah, so I'm going to play the video that I just posted a little bit ago, or a couple days ago, and then I'll go into more detail and explain it a little bit more to you guys. Okay, guys, sorry. Let's see here. Okay, I unplugged my headphones, so let's see if that worked or this changes anything. I'm sorry. Okay, so let's try this again.
Club doing an introduction for Megan J. Today we'll be looking a little bit more at some coincidences and inconsistencies in this case. What case am I talking about? Star search. We'll get back to that. Anagrams. What is an anagram? Anagrams are words or phrases you can pull from other existing words or phrases and are just one of a great many ways to hide code or leave clues in for us rabbit hole chasers to find. Let's look at Anadarko. If you try to use every letter of the word, you may come up with a phrase like a darn koan. What's a koan? Glad you asked. The late Eastern philosopher Alan Watts would have told you that a koan is an unsolvable riddle, one that, in attempting to solve, only enlightenment will achieve a solution. But we aren't talking about Eastern philosophy, and we aren't discussing the Eastern Company. We are talking of the West and the company Anadarko, which, as we all know, was bought out by Occidental Petroleum. Occident. That means of the West. It also means a coded language. No need to listen to me talk about Alan Watts or how much his mystic Eastern teachings are popular enough that no doubt any modern yogic, earth-worshipping Gaian will know of him. Gaia worship. You've heard of that. As a matter of fact, if you go to Gaia.com, you will find an ample supply of Alan Watts' teachings and talks. That's funny. Gaia and Watts in the same sentence. But let's go back to anagrams. If you look up the word Anadarko, you will see Okradana, Okradana, listed as a complete anagram of that word. That's right. It's in reverse. Now, try saying Chris Watts backwards. Let me help you out. STTAWSIRHC. Star search. Kind of sounds like Star Search, doesn't it? And hasn't this case had a lot of star power? A guy named Watts walks into his job at the power company to meet his girlfriend, a geologist named after minerals and metals. Sounds rocky and electrifying. Someone changed the channel. Anadarko, Okradana. So what is that? Why does that word exist except to maybe remind us all to look at things through this looking glass, this sensationalized energy conductive case? Well, the word does exist, and it's included in a series of books written by Frank Stevenson. These books include The Unlikely Journey, Bogata Backscatter, and The Death Sommelier. Remember that word, Bogata. All these books feature the fictional oil company Okradana, which is teeming with compromised CIA and FBI agents galore, as well volcanoes. Weren't volcanoes something of interest in this case? Well, yes. As a matter of fact, if you search Okradana, you will find some books on volcanoes too. In addition to a fictional representation of Anadarko, which we learn is a CIA front company in this series of books, we are introduced to plenty of geologists as well, including one named Jim, and a geologist with an interest in modernizing Eastern religion and bringing it over to the West, much like a certain Alan Watts. Remember that word I told you, Bogata? Well, here's where it becomes relevant again. Aside from being a part of the title in Book 2 of Frank Stevenson's work, you might want to take a look at this. Megan has uncovered a name and an address of a man in Texas, both with seemingly familiar patterns you may recognize. Look at that address again, Bogata, and take a look at the former address too while you're at it. Is this predictive programming, or simply a forerunner for the show? Frank's books were written a few years before the case, so why is Okradana the only fictional name given in this historical fiction series? All other names of existing oil companies are properly given. Is this to draw attention to its falsehood, or a hint at the truth? Perhaps to give a proper feeling to the whole backwards, upside-down case of cognitive dissonance we have all now become accustomed to. Oh, and Frank is a forensic engineer. That means his line of work involves being able to both replicate and recognize patterns in evidence. A lot of names pop up, and seemingly unnaturally in this case. Megan has already pointed out a few. But did you know that the Chinese Li means an organic pattern? And we sure have seen a pattern of Li's, haven't we? Li is also the name of the 13th Illuminati family, but we won't go too far down that rabbit hole just yet. How about Graham Coder? Well, aside from maybe a hint at the coding of all these anagrams, there is a resemblance in name to yet another serial killer, Graham Young. As well, the comparison can easily be made to the Thomas Harris fictional character, the detective Will Graham. Maybe Graham will code. In the interest of greater exploration, we will leave a link for all of you Star Watchers out there to purchase these books. Who knows? Maybe Frank will feel a little like Q&A if we drum up some sincere interest in his works. A whole lot of weird coincidences in this story. Just don't forget to stop looking around at the stars and start paying attention. If any of this is fake, we should all ask why.
Okay, so I just wanted to, again, show those of you that haven't seen the video already, so that way you can know what I'm going to be talking about. So I plugged my headphones back in. If you guys can't hear me, let me know, and I'll go ahead and continue. So not only do we have the overwhelming amount of American Horror Story connections and the predictive programming, as well as the real life serial killer / murder connections and breadcrumbs that the people controlling the Watson narrative have left for us to find. In this video that I just played, we now have this huge breadcrumb that was left for us to find in connection to these 3 books that are mentioned in the video by the author Frank Stephenson. Um, hold on one second. Sorry, guys. So I can't take the credit for the Anadarko Okradana connection. And all of that credit goes to Foxglove, who also did the narration for the video. She's an amazing researcher and has found many connections um, in the case that I probably would have never found. And oh, before I go any further, I want to mention as well that a couple of times in previous videos of mine, I've mentioned if something in this case seems weird or odd or out of place to you, then it probably is and should be looked into further. And this is how I found all of the American Horror Story connections as well as all of the others. So just keep that in mind as I continue. So as I was saying, I can't take credit for this find as it all goes to Foxglove. She's amazing, and it was a great find. So Foxglove brought the Okradana connection to my attention months ago after she had the idea to search for Okradana, which is an acronym of Anadarko, as you learned in the video. And when she told me all this, I was shocked at all the similarities in the author's series of books. You have an oil company called Okradana, a geologist named Jim, who we all know who Jim is. And if you're new to my channel, Jim is, I guess, somebody involved in the Watts case who, let's just say he's a friend of the mistresses or the mistress. So in the book, we have a geologist named Jim who does research on volcanoes, and we know from the discovery that Chris Watts searched for 2 different volcanoes. This is one of those examples that I told you about earlier, where it's one of those, that's really odd. Like, why would Chris search volcanoes? So it's one of those strange, odd moments that, as I mentioned earlier, are there because they probably are odd, and they're there because they were put on purpose. And at the time, it doesn't seem all that significant. But when you find the connection, it it makes a lot more sense. And it's easy to see that it was obviously put there for a reason. I stated a lot in my other videos as well that the majority of the information that is put in the discovery is there for a specific reason and because they want us to see it. They only show us what they want us to see. It's another one of those breadcrumbs that they leave to confuse us and to get us to deep dive down into the rabbit hole in order to figure out what in the hell it means and why on earth Chris Watts would randomly search for volcanoes. Um, you'll also notice that law enforcement will put these specific and random web searches into the discovery, but they won't explain or bother to as far as I know, they haven't, but bothered to ask Chris why he was searching volcanoes in the first place. Because you would think that law enforcement would ask these questions if they were important enough to put in the discovery. You think they'd be important enough to ask him why he searched for them. And I can't speak for everyone, but I know myself personally, search for multiple things every day on my phone, even when I'm not doing research. So to believe that all Chris searched for in a 2-month time frame, or however long it was that how far back they went on his phone records, is kind of absurd. And again, if they thought they were relevant enough to put in the discovery, then why didn't they ever ask Chris why he made the searches he did? So also mentioned in the Bogata, and I was told that I'm saying this wrong, so I will learn how to say it correctly. It's like Bogata, but Bogata backscatter is the mention of the Occidental deal, and we know that Occidental bought out Anadarko in 2019, just shortly after this event occurred. We also learn, oddly enough, not oddly enough, but something to keep in mind, that the Okradana company, oil company in the book, is actually a CIA front company, which is pretty interesting. And all of these connections can be found in just the preview of the book on Google. I personally have not read the books yet, which I plan on doing, but I've just not had the time. But I would not be surprised if there will be more when I do read them. So when Foxglove showed me all of this information, her and I both had a lot going on, and we both sort of just put it on the back burner for the time being. And there's a live that I did um, a while back where I told you guys about how I had just was doing some research and randomly decided to search for Chris Watts on one of those public records websites, specifically whitepages.com. And when I did, it showed that Chris Watts now lived in Bogota, Texas, in a tiny little house, even though he's supposed to be in prison. So here you have another one of those, that's strange. Why is whitepages.com showing that Chris lives in this tiny little house in Texas when, again, he's supposed to be in prison? And of course, I thought it was really odd, but I knew that the public information sites don't always get the information correct, but usually it's the person's age or date of birth. But I don't think I've ever seen an entire address be wrong that also had an image that went along with it. Um, and that's why I decided to go ahead and mention it anyways in the live that I did do, because you never know. So once again, I put it on the back burner for the time being. And a few months later, when I was telling a friend of mine who I actually met from the case about Foxglove's Okradana find, was when I had put two and two together. It had been so long that I could not for the life of me remember the name of the book. And which is why I didn't right away put the connections together. So when I went and looked up the book title again so I could let my friend know when I was explaining it to her, that's when it hit me. And I was like, holy like, Bogata, like what are the odds, right? So again, this is another one of those things where it was really odd, but at the time couldn't really make sense of it, but just something told me that this is weird. Why is this here? Why are they saying that Chris lives in this house in Bogota, Texas? It's just very strange. And why or how would whitepages.com mess up something that big? But in my gut, I knew that it was odd and out of place. And again, if it seems that way, it's probably because it is, and it was put there for a reason. The odds of the website saying that Chris Watts lives in Bogota, Texas, and all of the book connections are slim, and I can guarantee it was not a mistake. Also, not mentioned in the video, if you go back and you look at the address, if you flip the numbers of the address, they make 319. And we're all familiar with 319 as in Survey 319. So that's even more interesting. So I've explained many times that the people that control the Watts narrative are actually incorporating scenarios from real life murder cases, serial killers, and murderers into the Watts narrative. Just like how they do, the producers of American Horror Story do, and how they get their inspiration for their show. Same thing. A few that I've already mentioned before are we have Officer Ted Bundy that's in the Watts case discovery, which can be compared to Ted Bundy. Of course, they couldn't be exact. That would definitely be too obvious. But Ted Bundy, some might say, okay, when you first see this, oh, it's probably just coincidence. Okay, that's fair, but let's keep going. Then you have Deputy Katie Tack. I'm probably botching that, but it's a Ukrainian last name. And then you have the Ukrainian serial killer Serhii Tak, who just so happened to kill 23 people. Okay, so they bear the same last name. Then another one I've mentioned previously is Trooper Otto Wilson, who also worked on the Watts case, bears the same name as serial killer Otto Wilson, who murdered 2 prostitutes in 1944. This one, they didn't even bother to change the name at all. Otto Wilson, Otto Wilson. Then another one I've mentioned is you have Officer Ken Dahl, which is again one of those weird, like, Ken Dahl, like who would really name their kid Ken Dahl? But surprisingly enough, there are actually a number of Kenneth Dahls out there. I didn't know that. But when you stick it in with all these other connections and coincidences, it's not, it's odd. So you have Ken Dahl that worked on the Watts case, and then you have the Ken and Barbie killers, who were Paul Bernardo and Carla Homolka. Also worth mentioning is that Paul's father's name was Kenneth. So those are just some of the ones I've mentioned previously. And there's one that I actually found this morning by accident. And I am going to share screenshots for these. I didn't do it for the other ones because I've already showed you guys a number of times. So let me share my screen. Okay. So this one I found by accident this morning. Hopefully you guys can see it. The CEO of Anadarko at the time the event happened was R.A. Walker, also known as Al Walker. And then here's another website that actually shows Al Walker. And if I remember, I will leave these links in the description for you guys. Oh, and this is rather interesting. He's from North Carolina, and we know who's from North Carolina as well. That could be a coincidence, but again, something to keep in mind. Okay, so that's the CEO of Anadarko, Al Walker, at the time. I don't know if he still is. Then you have Albert Johnson Walker, or Al Walker, who is a Canadian murderer that was convicted of killing his business partner in 1996. So again, we have another name connection to the people involved in the Watts case, to another murderer. Okay, that's all the screenshots I have. But I was going to get you a screenshot of the next thing I'm going to talk about, but I forgot. But I think you guys don't really need screenshots for it. So that's as far as I have so far for all the serial killer murderer name connections in the Watts case that they're leaving for us. So there's a couple more things that I found since I last did a live, as far as them putting more breadcrumbs from high profile like well-known murder cases. And another thing that I found odd was that Amanda Thayer only had one earring in during her interview with her husband, Nick Thayer. Why anyone didn't tell poor Amanda that she was missing an earring before she did her interview, I don't know. Maybe nobody noticed, but I clearly did when I watched it. And again, as I said before, it's another one of those, that's odd moments. Like, why is she not? Why didn't she make sure that she had two earrings in before she did this interview? And if she did, why is she showing the ear that she doesn't have the earring in, like on that side? Anyways, I thought it was odd. And at the time, I didn't know why it was odd. And it wasn't until I was listening to, what was it? Hold on, let me get my thought. Oh, okay. I didn't find the connection. Sorry, guys. I didn't find the connection until Cher, who is another YouTube creator, and her channel is called Voices Behind the Wall. She was on another creator's channel discussing the O.J. Simpson case. And at some point during the show or the live, I heard her mention something about how Nicole Brown Simpson was missing a diamond earring. And right when she said it, I immediately thought of Amanda Thayer and her missing earring. Again, at the time, I thought it was odd that she forgot to put both earrings in for interview, but after putting the connection together, it really makes sense. And I'm not going to go over all of the other like Scott Peterson connections and everything because you guys have already heard them. I just wanted to go over the new ones today, but there's a plethora of them. And these are only some of the connections and breadcrumbs that I've found so far, and I'm sure I'll continue to find more as time goes on. And I don't even have to search hard for these connections because they're right there. And especially if you know a lot about true crime and have followed a lot of these high profile cases, they should be exceptionally easy to spot. And I don't know as much information as someone in the true crime community would know. So I unfortunately had to research some of this stuff in order to find the connections that I did. Except they were all simple one-time search findings that took me straight to these breadcrumbs. So it's not like I had to like dig deep and search and like go to all these like, no, you just put a name in, boom, there it is. Like they're really not, like they're super easy. And this is why they willingly release the amount of information that they did to the public. They make it seem like they're doing us a favor and being transparent when in actuality, they're really not. They release the discovery so that when they leave the public with more questions and answers, it will it'll consume all of our time trying to figure out why there are so many inconsistencies and send us down these rabbit holes to find their clever little breadcrumbs that they leave and that they've left all over the place for us. They do this in order to keep us occupied and distract us from what is really going on in the world, or maybe even try to pass another law without us even knowing. I mean, there could be many reasons for it, but those are just a few or a couple to mention. But many won't realize this because that's the part of the psychological operation. And unless a person is aware of these tactics, they'll spend the rest of their lives being a victim to these psyops without ever knowing that they've been affected either physically or emotionally. And that's all I have. So I will just look at the chat for a minute here and see what you guys are saying, since I can't pay attention when I'm just trying to get through it. Hi, Shan. Kellyanne, yeah, that'd be good to count them because, or at least put them down on paper, which I thought about doing because I mean, it's the amount of connections are overwhelming, and I mean, they're not a coincidence. They're not coincidences because that's what they do in these psyops is they they want us to find these little breadcrumbs. They think they're just so clever. And sorry again for all the technical difficulties, but you know how that goes. But I mean, I couldn't make this stuff up if I tried, you guys. Like, it's actually quite amazing how much effort goes into these operations and how much of all these breadcrumbs they leave. I mean, it's not that I want to give them credit, but it is actually pretty amazing. And I've never seen the amount of predictive programming that I've seen in this case with American Horror Story ever, and any other psychological operation. I mean, it's like massive. And yeah, Kellyanne, that's that's a whole part of the operation is because they pull at people's heartstrings and they get to your emotions so that and they make them so horrific that anybody that questions the official narrative or um, starts talking so-called conspiracy theories, they're made to look like a terrible person for questioning the official narrative or to make out to be a crazy person. But they do that purposely. Again, it's all part of the psychological operation. I'm just going to start saying psyop. And I was gonna try not to bring this whole fiasco up from yesterday about the new information that came out. I haven't even watched the Netflix Discovery yet. I mean, documentary yet because I knew it was just gonna piss me off, and I didn't want to be pissed off before I did this live. But the phone calls from yesterday, or the phone call that was released yesterday, I really want people to number one, again, don't believe everything that you are told, see, and hear, because just because you're told that's what's going on and that's what you see, it doesn't mean it's true. And try to ask yourself, why was this information released? The timing of the information of when it was released. Who was the person that released this information? And why was it leaked? I might have already said why, but you get what I'm saying. So, why was this phone call released at the time that it was released at, a day before the Netflix documentary? Who was this person that released it, and who do they know? What are their motives for releasing it? Besides views, it's not always just about views. A lot of times it is, but again, just because somebody tells you that Chris Watts is appealing and that this is a phone call that he made from prison, it doesn't prove diddly squat. And that's what I'm trying to show you guys. And that's what that people need to learn, is that not to be just so quick to just believe everything you hear, because it's so easy these days to just say, hey, this is what happened and this guy killed all his whole family, and just expect everybody to believe it. And a lot of people do, with no evidence, no physical evidence. It's all circumstantial. But a lot of people won't question it, because why would they? Why would they think that the government is capable of orchestrating an event like the Watts case? And unless you know and are aware of the things that the government does and are capable of, then you wouldn't question it. But if you're aware of these tactics and these patterns and these characteristics that they use every single time, they're easy to spot. And they release this kind of information, this new stuff, these jail phone calls or whatever, to get us interested in the case again, have our bury our heads in, in these phone calls, and just, sorry, I'm like, my voice keeps cracking. It's like I'm 3 again. Um, and but yeah, they release this stuff and people just automatically just believe it, and they say, "Oh my God, Chris Watts is appealing. Oh my God, this is a." How do we know that? How do we know that? Because somebody told us that, and because we heard Chris Watts say it on the phone. I know it might sound crazy, but I mean, if you really think about it, we don't really know if he is or not, because we, granted, we probably don't have a way of vetting it, but if you look at it from a different standpoint and you say, whoa, 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 wait a second, like, this is weird. Why is this all of a sudden being released? And how did it get released? And again, who released it? Like, that's what I really want you guys to think about first before you believe anything as far as that goes. In my opinion, those calls were released again to distract us and get us concentrated on the case again, so we're not seeing what's going around that's important in the world right now. Again, it's all a part of the psyop. And unless you know about them, you're not going to know that you're being lied to, or that this stuff going around us is not real. But that's all part of the psyop. So I hope that makes sense. And why is it that all these, YouTube channels, or not all of them, but there's a select few that are just somehow getting this like breaking news and um these phone calls and this footage, and they're just these, not, I don't want to say no name YouTube channels, but I'm just saying, like, why are they being released to these YouTube channels or creators and not to any of the mainstream media outlets? And why is the, channels that are releasing this information, I'm pretty sure that they even know the family. So that's something else to think about as well before you just automatically assume that these phone calls or this phone call was real and that Chris is really appealing. It's all a show, you guys. All it's just one big dog and pony show. It's and we all have front row seats. Period. And there's going to be many people that I'm not going to be able to, no matter how much evidence I show, or I mean, because everything I pretty much say you can go and look up yourselves if you just research these operations and research other ones in the past. I mean, it's there. It's not like I'm throwing out this theory. And again, once you know of all these characteristics and these patterns that they use, it's so easy to spot these things. Not all the time, because again, they're going to be all different. It could be big, small, domestic, foreign. Like, it doesn't matter. But at least if you know these characteristics, then you can at least say, oh, okay, wait a second, like this murder case that just became high profile, it's showing a lot of the characteristics and patterns that Megan showed me. Maybe I should step back and think logically here before I let my emotions get to me and consume me. It's just so important to just, like, again, and it sounds cheesy, but just think for yourself and do your own research, because nowadays you don't know what's real and what's fake, and that's unfortunate, because before, as far as I know, you were able to turn on the news and get the news without having to decipher whether or not it's real or fake. But for 2 years now, I have seen, I don't know how many people make comments saying, "Oh my God, I've been crying for like," and I'm not making fun of these people. I just want to just make that clear. But I don't. They're saying, "I don't know. I've just been, every time I see Shanann's videos of her and the girls, I just bawl my eyes out, and I just can't even function right now, and I'm so scared of that my husband's gonna do it to me," and like that is, I just see all that, and it's just really sad, because a lot of these people are getting sad over something that's not real, when there's so many other, like, women and children, and not just women and children, but people, innocent people, that die in horrific ways every single day, that are not getting this type of reaction from people, that the same reaction that they are to this case. But again, that's all a part of the psyop. And people, you can sit here and you can try, like, I tried my hardest not to say this for like the longest time, but apparently I just need to start just being more blunt and straightforward because for 2 years now, people have been trying to solve this case, and it's the same thing that I saw with the Las Vegas shooting. People dedicated their, like, lives of figuring this out. Granted, it's a little different with the Las Vegas shooting because, um, a lot of the people that were covering and making those videos are people like myself that, um, know about these operations and these orchestrated events that are put on by the government and the powers that be. But people still to this day are still trying to um, figure out what the heck went on with the Las Vegas shooting. The problem is with that is with this Watts case is with the information that we've been given, it's only half of the information for one, and for two, the information that they've given us is we don't even know if it's factual or not. I personally don't think any of it's factual, but if we look at it from not my point of view and we just look at it from the official narrative, they've only given us half the information, and you can't solve a case with only half the information. They released all of this information willingly for a reason. I mean, it's difficult enough as it is just to get um, FOIA requests and or CORA requests for just your own case from these people, let alone have them release, but then they would just release all this information just willingly. Like, think about it, you guys. Like, why did they release all this information? Not all this information. I like to say the amount of information they did because the amount of information they released was not a whole heck of a lot. And we all know that. But why did they do it? Why was Shanann's Facebook all made public? Why was all the body cam footage released? Why was it useless, pointless body cam footage that was released? Oh, Roger, that's fine. If you want to go to Molly Golightly's, I won't be mad at you. But aren't you blocked from her channel anyways? Or Big Juicy, I'm sorry. Um, so where was I? Yeah, so just think about it. This is the only case where they've released all of this information willingly when any other time they make it almost impossible to get any public records from you or from them. And all of Shanann's Facebook was made public so that it pulls at your heartstrings and you see her with her and the girls, and that's when the emotions kick in, and that's when again it's all a part of the psyop. But you won't know it's a psyop unless you know what to look for, and that's what I'm trying to show people. And the reason why I'm still going into live chats with all of you and still talking about the case and whatever is not because I'm still trying to figure out what happened. I already know what happened, and I can say that with confidence. But I started a channel and I started making these videos because I want to show people the truth. And if that takes me, because my channel's not big, but and if that takes me going into live chats with everyone still and, conversing with people and throw my 2 cents in there every once in a while, then I'll do it. And again, I don't expect every single person that hears me and watches my videos to just say, "Oh, yep, I believe everything she says." That's not what I don't expect that. And cognitive dissonance will play a huge factor for a lot of people, and unfortunately, those are the ones that are going to continue to live the rest of their lives being subjected to these psyops and be controlled through their emotions and their fears. And that's exactly what they're doing. This case was targeted at women and children so that they, ultimately feel like if Chris Watts can do this to someone like Chris Watts can do this to his family who showed no prior signs of anything, and he was such a great guy, great husband, then what's stopping it from any other person's husband or significant other from doing the same thing to them? So there's one more thing I want to share with you guys since I'm just rambling now, which I try not to do on these. It's not easy talking to yourself, though, that's for sure. And I wanted to have this up the entire time, but I didn't know how to put it up, so one second. Okay, let me see if it's coming on the screen. Okay, there it is. So these are what I wanted to have on the screen the whole time, but again, I didn't know how to share it. These are all not all of them, but these are some of the main characteristics that you can look out for in the future, and they'll give you a good idea that it's probably not real. So first, I have them all checked because they are all in the Watts case, and I'll just go over them real quick and then I'll end this, promise. So the first one to look out for is it a high profile case that gained widespread media attention fairly quickly? And we know that the Watts case is a high profile case, and it did gain widespread media attention because we know that Chris stood on his porch and gave those interviews pleading for the safe return of his family. So we'll check that one. Then you have another characteristic to look out for, which is the story or the narrative changed multiple times. We know this is true in the Watts case because we've had Chris's confession, 2, 3 different confessions now. We've had multiple things pop up out of nowhere, just like this, like the jail phone calls. We have Sherilyn Cato's book that went into more detail that changed the story about Kessinger being, into dark things and Gaia worship and pagan, whatever. So that changes the story. Then we have the shadows that we were all made aware of that DA Rourke had to come out and address. So you have that. So we'll check that. And then another characteristic to look out for is the killer didn't fit the profile. And we know that Chris most definitely does not fit the profile of a killer. Anybody that follows this case will know how many times over and over again people have said, I just don't understand how he could kill his entire family. He was just, he didn't show any signs. He was a great husband, great father. Again, all a part of the psyop. Check. Another one to look out for is people benefiting. There were multiple people that benefited, or persons that benefited in this case. First one is usually money. So if you follow the money, that's a good start. You have Shanann, who had all her Thrive videos made public and watched by hundreds of thousands of people multiple times sometimes. And in every single one of her videos, she was wearing a Thrive patch or she was selling Thrive. Also, you can find Thrive and Lavelle mentioned numerous amounts of times in the discovery, in the interviews, in the interrogations, if you want to call it that. You also have all of the mainstream media outlets that mentioned Shanann working for Thrive and Lavelle. So right there, Lavelle got a ton of free publicity. I mean, a ton of it. There's no picture in the Watts case where you didn't see somebody wearing a Thrive patch, except for maybe a couple, and that's of Chris and Kessinger. So, I mean, it's like a publisher's dream. So, a publicist, not publisher. And that's just, I'm only going to name one. That's just one, that there's multiple. So we'll check that. And then the next one is the case was quickly closed. No trial is another characteristic to look out for. We know that the Watts case was wrapped up extremely fast, with like in a period of like a few months, like 3 months, I think. You also have no trial because Chris, even though he just took all this time to plan and murder his entire family, he just decided to cave and just say, yep, I did it, after a few hours, like 4 hours of interrogation, again, if you want to call it that. And the reason why the case is quickly closed and there's no trial, I know a lot of people think it's because Anadarko wanted it covered up and they didn't want the bad publicity, but which kind of works in their favor, but that's not why. They want to avoid a trial, which would, well, for one, you can't have a trial on something that's not real, because you would actually have to have evidence for that, and there is none of that in this case. So that's one reason why they don't want it to go to trial. Another reason why is you would have to, again, show evidence and gather witnesses, and having a trial would only bring out inconsistencies in the case, which would go against the official narrative, and they wouldn't want to have that, would they? So check. The next one, no actual crime scene, no autopsy photos. In the instance of the Watts case, we have 3 possible potential crime scenes, but we don't actually have a physical crime scene where we, without a doubt, know that this is where the crimes were committed. So, were they killed in the house? Were they killed in the truck? Were they killed at the oil site? Was it all of the above? Was it just the first 2? Was it just the last 2? So that's another characteristic to look out for in these orchestrated events. Oh, and the autopsy photos. If they fail to prove um, or show proof of any victims, that's a huge red flag. I mean, in the Watts case, we don't even have, it's not that people want to necessarily, I mean, me personally, I can't speak for everybody, but it's not that we want to see gruesome photos of murder victims, but with all of the inconsistencies and the lack of transparency surrounding the case, it doesn't help them at all as far as um, proving that any of this actually happened. And not only that, but they don't even have show a picture of a foot or the marks around Shanann's neck. They or X-ray photos or dental impressions. Like nothing. We don't have zip zero nada. They say that they found a tuft of hair in the oil tank inlet, but they don't even give us a photo of the hair. And you would think that they would want to do that, but the funny thing is they don't. It's not funny, but the thing is that they don't care. They don't care that there's all of these inconsistencies that they made, or that nothing adds up, or that they look incompetent. They don't care because it's they already pushed the narrative onto everybody. They already pushed the psyop. It and what are we going to do about it? We could name off inconsistencies in this case for days, but they know that there's nothing we can do about it. Because they're not going to come out and address any of these inconsistencies because they haven't yet and they never will. Even when Rourke came out and I think he only did it because of how many people made a fuss about it, was when he came out and addressed Kessinger's internet searches, the 2017 search. I think he did it because he was pressured into doing it, kind of, to because he wouldn't want to make himself look bad. You know how he cares about his image. So, but even then, when he came out and addressed it, he had this whole attitude like, oh, well, that's what it is, and that's what it says. That's what it says, and never even gave an explanation for it. So again, they never come out and explain these inconsistencies or anything. So check, and then you have FBI, CIA involvement. You'll notice in these orchestrated events that the FBI and the CIA was always going to get involved. Like they're always going to have their hand in it, no matter what. Also, a lot of times the people involved in these events will already have a connection um, with the FBI or the CIA. You just have to find them. So check. Then we have military or acting backgrounds. A lot of times, since these are usually military psychological operations, a lot of the people involved are going to have military backgrounds and or acting backgrounds. So obviously they're not going to be A-list actors, but they will have some sort of acting in their repertoire. But as far as the Watts case goes, I just added this one in because after doing research, I am keeps taking me back to a military background because one, you have Chris and Shanann who have the USSA Bank, USAA, something like that, USAA Bank, which is a military only bank, and then you have talk of Shanann growing up on or near Fort Bragg in North Carolina, which is where the Watts are from. If you look at Melissa Parrish, she has a connection to Fort Bragg. Melissa Parrish is obviously the coworker of Chris Watts. For Roger and Michelle, who don't know this case, she's a coworker of Chris Watts, and I found a connection with her to Fort Bragg, which has also been known to have a pretty big psychological operation, military, whatever you want to call it there. So that's another characteristic to look out for. So check. And then the next one is evidence tampering or destroyed. In the Watts case, we know that the Watts house was never treated as a crime scene, since from the previous one that I mentioned is we have no actual crime scene. But even after they had their suspicions of Chris being involved or having something to do with the murders, it was never taped off. It was never secured. They had people walking in and out, you know, friends, family, news reporters, Chris, you name it. Like the defense team, it was never treated as a crime scene, and it should have. So all those people walking in, touching everything, already tainted everything. Then you have evidence that's destroyed, such as Chris's work truck being auctioned off just shortly after the murders. So by doing that, you no longer have, in case it does get reopened or something, they no longer have that evidence. It's gone. And I'm sure there's more that I'm missing, but so check that. And then the next one is little to no emotion, duper's delight. Okay, sorry, my kitty was crying. So little to no emotion or duper's delight. So we know that in the body cam footage of the walkthrough and everything of the Watts house, that we see Chris multiple times kind of smirk at really odd and, well, he shouldn't be smirking at all because his family's missing. So it's not really odd times. It's like, it's just he starts smirking for no reason. That's Duper's delight, and it's a lot of people will um, say it's because he's a narcissist. They'll throw that word out there and say he's a narcissist, and because he's a sick individual. And to be honest, it pisses me off because that kind of does work in their favor. But it's probably Duper's delight because he, for one, is not a good actor. Two, because he probably is realizing that he's fooling hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people and tricking them into thinking that he actually murdered his entire family. Another reason could be that he knows that he's going to get a hefty payout or benefit greatly from all of this. You see it a lot in these, orchestrated events, and especially you'll see it especially in actual crisis actors. So where they'll be giving interviews, and all of their classmates, like 10 of their classmates, were just killed, just hours before, and you'll see them smiling. It's called Duper's delight. Um, so we know that, and then we know that Chris shows little to no emotion for Shanann or the girls. And again, that's people can say it's because of he's a narcissist and he's a murderer and he's has no soul. But it's hard to show emotion for something that didn't happen. So, and again, he's not a good actor either. And I think, in my opinion, this is only my opinion, but I believe that that's why you see in the first interview slash interrogation that they did with Chris, he was facing the camera, but there is a time where you actually see him smirk when Coder asks him a question, and I think that they caught on to that, and so his second interview slash interrogation, his back was towards the camera because they didn't want anybody analyzing it or scrutinizing it or doing any sort of analysis on it, so that they would start to catch on and like be able to, because how are any psychologists or psychiatrists or FBI or any law enforcement going to be able to go back and look at his interview slash interrogation and be able to learn from it and analyze it for future reference when they can't even see his face? It just doesn't make any sense. So in my opinion, I think it's because his lack of experience and his lack of acting um, showed in his first interrogation, and that's why his back was towards the camera. So little to no emotion, Duper's delight, check. Then the last but not least is the predictive programming, which there is a overwhelming amount of predictive programming, and in American Horror Story, it's so overwhelming, it's insane. And then we have all of the breadcrumbs from the serial killer and high profile murder cases that they've left that I've gone over, as well as now the Bogota backscatter and the series of books that mention Okradana, Anadarko, Occidental, CIA, boom, boom, boom. Like, it's overwhelming, and it's still blows my mind how much there is. But if you can say, not necessarily all of these characteristics, but because again, each event is going to be different from the other one. And they're going to have characteristics that are going to cater to that specific event. But generally speaking, usually they're going to have, these are going to be the main characteristics to look out for. If you spot these, it's likely that it's a psyop or it's an orchestrated event and it's not real and you're being made a fool of. So in the future, if you can say, okay, if you start to see these, that's when you're going to want to at least 2, 3, 4. Once you start seeing those amounts of characteristics and similarities, that's when you're going to want to stop and think, whoa, wait a second. Megan showed me all these similarities and patterns. Maybe I should, before I get emotional about this, new murder case or something, or this terrorist attack, maybe I should stop and think rationally and logically before I just let my emotions take over me. So if you notice these patterns, try to take a step back and just think logically. And then that's all. I'm done. And I would stop and read the chat, but it's always so far behind. And then there's just dead space. So I'm just going to go ahead and end this. And thank you, everyone, for being here. And I'm sorry about all the technical difficulties and the rambling. And love you all. Bye.